The 12 powerful titans of Greek mythology. Mnemosyne, the Titaness of Memory. Chapter 1. The birth of Mnemosyne. Memory given form in the beginning, when chaos still lingered and the cosmos was a newborn flame. The Titans emerged from Gaia, the earth, and Uranus, the sky. Among them was Mnemosyne, whose very name meant memory. Unlike her brothers, who embodied force, sea, or sky, and unlike her sisters, who carried light, law, or fertility, Mnemosyne carried something more elusive, the eternal remembrance of all things. When she opened her eyes for the first time, the stars seemed to burn brighter, for she gave meaning to their existence by recalling their place in the night sky. She was not the strongest Titan, nor the most fearsome, yet she was essential for, without memory, time itself would pass unnoticed, and the deeds of gods and mortals alike would fade into oblivion. Mnemosyne's presence calmed her siblings. When Hyperion shone too brightly, she remembered the balance of dawn and dusk. When Kus demanded to pierce the mysteries of heaven, she tempered his search with the lessons of the past. When Themis established divine law, Mnemosyne etched it into the eternal scroll of existence, so it would never be forgotten. Unlike Cronus, who sought power, or Oceanus, who stretched endlessly, Mnemosyne walked quietly between them all. She carried no weapon, only the soft glow of remembrance, a light that could never be extinguished. Yet even in the age of Titans, memory was not neutral. It could heal, but it could also wound. Mnemosyne remembered the cruelty of Uranus, who imprisoned his children, and she never allowed that memory to fade. It was her silent whisper that stirred Cronus to rebellion, though she herself took no sword in hand. She knew that to remember was to empower, and in her silence lay an influence greater than armies. As the Titanomachy began to stir, Mnemosyne often retreated to the quiet places of the world. She walked the rivers, whispering names so they would endure. She sat beneath trees, teaching them to remember the winds that touched their leaves. She became the invisible keeper of continuity, ensuring that nothing in creation would vanish without leaving its echo. But the destiny of Mnemosyne would not remain solitary, for in time, Zeus himself, after the fall of the Titans, would seek her out, drawn not by conquest, but by reverence. From their union, 9 daughters would be born, each carrying a part of her divine essence. These daughters would be known as the Muses, goddesses of inspiration, the eternal wellspring of song, poetry, history, and art. And so Mnemosyne's story began not with war or thrones, but with the gift of remembrance, the power that would outlast empires, gods, and even the Titans themselves. For where there is memory, there is immortality. This was the birth of Mnemosyne, Titaness of Memory, whose role would shape both the destiny of Olympus and the hearts of mortals for all eternity. Chapter 2. The Silent Watcher. Mnemosyne among Titans. The halls of the Titans rang with power, each voice echoing like thunder through the cosmos. Cronus boasted of his dominion over time. Hyperion spoke of light and the fire of the sun. Oceanus whispered of rivers without end. Yet, amid their grand declarations, Mnemosyne remained quiet. She was there, always there, but seldom noticed, for her strength was not in display, but in remembrance. Where others clamored for dominion, Mnemosyne listened. She listened to the triumphs and the failures of her kin, to the quarrels that flared, and the moments of unity that soon faded. She stored each memory as carefully as one would guard sacred flame. When Cronus struck down Uranus, Mnemosyne remembered the sky's cry of anguish and the blood that birthed the Furies and Aphrodite. She did not raise her hand in the act, but she carried it within her as a warning. The wounds of the cosmos never truly fade. When Themis decreed order and balance, Mnemosyne stood at her side, weaving those laws into the loom of eternity. For what use was justice if it was not remembered? She ensured that the laws of Themis would live beyond the moment, engraved not upon stone, but within the endless stream of recollection. Her siblings sometimes mocked her silence. Coups, sharp with intellect, demanded, "Why do you watch and not act, sister? Why do you hoard shadows of the past instead of shaping the future?" Mnemosyne only replied softly, "Because the future is built upon the past, and the past must be remembered, lest we repeat its sorrow." In the great councils of the Titans, her words were rarely the loudest, but often they lingered longest. Even Cronus, whose hunger for rule overshadowed his wisdom, would sometimes fall quiet when Mnemosyne spoke, as if reminded of truths too vast for ambition to erase. And so she became the silent watcher, the presence that neither rivaled nor yielded, but endured. She walked among her kindred like a shadow of eternity, unseen yet indispensable. When the rivers changed their course, she whispered the old paths to them. When mountains rose, she remembered the plains they once were. When stars were born, she kept their names, never to be forgotten. But her silence was not emptiness, it was power concealed. For memory was a double-edged gift. To recall joy was to nourish hope, yet to recall pain was to awaken vengeance. Mnemosyne knew this better than any, and she bore it with solemn grace. And in the stillness of her gaze, the Titans came to understand. What is forgotten is lost, but what is remembered lives forever. Thus, Mnemosyne remained quiet, patient, eternal, waiting the turning of ages, when memory would no longer be a shadow among Titans, but the guiding flame of gods and mortals alike. Chapter 3: Keeper of Secrets. Mnemosyne and the Hidden Truths. Though Mnemosyne's power was subtle, it reached into the deepest corners of existence. She did not merely preserve memories of events and deeds, she held the truths too dangerous to be spoken aloud, the secrets the world itself tried to bury. The Titans, mighty and proud, often believed their actions vanished with the passing of time. But Mnemosyne remembered. She recalled the schemes whispered in shadow, the oaths broken beneath the stars, the cruelties committed in silence. To her, nothing could be erased. Cronus, for all his glory, feared her most of all, though he wielded the sickle that felled Uranus and wore the crown of his father's defeat. Mnemosyne carried within her the memory of that crime, and while others praised him as king of the Titans, Mnemosyne never let him forget the scream of the heavens when the blade struck. Once he came to her, his voice heavy with both suspicion and pride. "Sister, do you intend to speak of what I have done? Do you intend to poison the loyalty of the others with your remembrance?" Mnemosyne's eyes, calm as a still river, met his. "I do not speak, Cronus. I remember. It is not I who will betray you, it is memory itself. For what is done cannot be undone nor silenced. One day, even your children will know the truth, and they will judge you for it." These words unsettled him. For a tyrant may silence voices, but he cannot silence memory. Mnemosyne also knew of secrets that even the Titans themselves could not see. She remembered the first cries of chaos, the unspoken bonds between earth and sky, the hidden weaving of fate that even Themis could not entirely chart. In dreams, mortals would sometimes glimpse her shadow, a whisper of memory too ancient for their fragile minds to carry. Many awoke in awe, claiming they had touched eternity. And it was not only mortals who came to her. The gods, even in their youth, sought her wisdom. Apollo, the god of prophecy, often visited her in the veiled places of the world. For memory was kin to foresight. Without knowledge of what has been, one cannot see what is to come. From Mnemosyne, he learned that history repeats itself, and that the patterns of memory form the very backbone of destiny. Mnemosyne did not reveal all she knew. She guarded her secrets as carefully as she preserved them, for she understood that some truths, if released too soon, could shatter worlds. Yet she also knew that memory cannot be hidden forever. One day, all would surface like stars, returning to the night sky. And so Mnemosyne carried the burden of knowledge, silent and solemn. She was the keeper of secrets that even time itself could not wash away. Her gift was not to change fate, but to remind all who lived that their actions would echo long after they were gone. Thus, while the other Titans strove for dominion, Mnemosyne stood apart, cloaked not in might, but in the quiet weight of eternal truth. Chapter 4. The Whispers of Memory. Mnemosyne and mortals. When the Titans first ruled the cosmos, mortals were but fragile sparks upon the earth, brief flames flickering against the vastness of eternity. To most of the elder gods, these fleeting lives were little more than shadows, insignificant, perishable, and easily forgotten. Yet to Mnemosyne, the Titaness of Memory, they were precious. For what is the worth of existence, if not remembered? What is the life of a mortal, if it fades like smoke into nothingness? To Mnemosyne, even the briefest life carried meaning, and that meaning deserved remembrance. She began to walk among them in veiled form, cloaking her divine radiance, so as not to overwhelm their fragile senses. She appeared as a woman of noble bearing, her eyes calm pools of light, her voice soft as running water. Wherever she went, she carried the air of familiarity, as though mortals had always known her, though they could not recall from where. At first, the mortals feared her, for gods seldom visited them without demand or punishment. But Mnemosyne asked for nothing. Instead, she listened. She sat by their fires and heard their stories, tales of the hunt, of hardship, of love and loss. She remembered them all, not merely the deeds of kings, but the struggles of shepherds, the songs of mothers, the laughter of children. She held every detail as though it were as sacred as the rising of the sun. One evening, an elder of a small tribe spoke to her with trembling lips. "Lady, why do you hear our words? We are dust. When we fall into the earth, no one will recall us. The gods care only for their thrones above, not for our tiny lives." Mnemosyne smiled, and her reply was gentle. "You are wrong, wise elder, for though your bones return to the soil, your memory does not perish. I carry it, your names, your stories, your joys, and your sorrows. They live within me. So long as I endure, you will not be forgotten." Her words became hope for mortals. They began to believe that memory itself was a kind of immortality, a bridge across the gulf of death. Even when their bodies fell, their stories endured in the eternal consciousness of Mnemosyne. Over time, whispers spread among villages and tribes. Some called her the eternal listener. Others named her the mother of stories. In dreams, she would come to them, speaking their own lives back to them, reminding them that they mattered, that their brief existence left a mark upon eternity. But her gift was not without danger, for Mnemosyne remembered not only joy, but pain. She recalled every betrayal, every cruelty, every wound mortals inflicted upon one another. To her, the cries of the fallen on the battlefield were as vivid as the laughter of feasts. Mortals began to realize that she carried their sins as well as their triumphs. One chieftain, fearful of her power, once begged her to erase his crimes. He had slain his brother to seize leadership and sought to bury the truth forever. He knelt before Mnemosyne, offering sacrifices of gold and blood. "Forget it," he pleaded. "Erase what I have done, and I will worship you all my days." But Mnemosyne only shook her head. "I cannot forget. To forget is to destroy. Memory endures, whether you desire it or not. What you have done will live within me until the end of all things." The chieftain left in despair, for he understood then that no power, not even death, could wash away his guilt. Mnemosyne's gift was both blessing and curse, salvation and judgment. Yet from this duality came wisdom. Mortals began to live more carefully, knowing their deeds would echo in eternity. Villages told stories not only to honor their heroes, but to warn against cruelty and folly. Mothers taught their children that memory is a flame. It can warm, but it can also burn. And always, behind these lessons, was the silent presence of Mnemosyne, the Titaness who remembered. As centuries passed, her whispers wove themselves into mortal culture. They carved songs, shaped rituals, and gave rise to the first oral traditions. When a hunter slew a great beast, his name was spoken in stories long after his bones had crumbled. When a poet sang by the fire, his verses endured across generations. When lovers embraced beneath the stars, their devotion became legend. It was Mnemosyne's influence that planted the seed of history in the human soul. Mortals, once content to live and die in silence, now sought remembrance. They began to record, not with ink or stone, but with words, passed from tongue to tongue, heart to heart. And though they did not always know it, they were guided by her unseen hand. The other Titans scarcely noticed her work, absorbed as they were in their own grandeur. But the younger god Zeus, Apollo, Athena would one day see the value of her gift. For prophecy, wisdom, and glory all depend on memory. Without her, the past would be dust, the present meaningless, and the future blind. Thus, while war and power consumed her kin, Mnemosyne shaped the destiny of mortals in silence. She did not lead armies, nor rule thrones. Instead, she gave humanity its most enduring treasure, the knowledge that to be remembered is to live forever. And so, the whispers of Mnemosyne spread across the earth, a soft murmur carried on wind and water. To this day, in every tale told and every song sung, the echo of her presence lingers. For where memory lives, Mnemosyne endures. Chapter 5. The Burden of Memory. Mnemosyne's eternal weight, memory, though a gift, is never light. For each joy Mnemosyne carried in her eternal soul, there was also grief. For every triumph she remembered, there was a tragedy that balanced it. Over the eons, this weight grew heavier, pressing upon her spirit like chains no mortal eye could see. She was the keeper of all remembrance, yet what mortals and even gods did not understand was that to remember was also to suffer. When she recalled the laughter of children, she could not help but also recall their cries when famine struck. When she remembered the glory of kings, she could not forget the blood they spilled to seize their crowns. Every betrayal, every cruelty, Every sorrow of the cosmos passed into her heart, where it remained forever. Unlike mortals, she could not forget. Unlike gods, she could not look away. Often she withdrew into solitude, wandering the silent forests or the deep caverns of the earth. There she would sit in stillness, eyes closed, as memories surged within her countless voices, rising and falling like waves upon a restless sea. At times she wept, though her tears were not of water, but of shimmering light, drops that fell to the ground and became sacred springs. Mortals who drank from these springs claimed visions of the past, as though Mnemosyne's sorrow had entered their veins. The other Titans seldom noticed her burden. Cronus, obsessed with rule, cared little for memory. Oceanus flowed endlessly, indifferent to what was carried downstream. Even Themis, though close to her, did not always perceive the full weight of her sister's role. For justice is measured in moments, but memory stretches across eternity. Yet the younger gods began to sense her quiet suffering. Apollo, god of prophecy, once approached her as she rested in a grove of cypress. "Great Mnemosyne," he said softly, "I see visions of what is to come, and often they trouble me. But you carry everything that has already been. Is it not unbearable?" Mnemosyne looked upon him with weary eyes. "It is the burden I was given at birth, and the burden I chose to bear. Without memory, Apollo prophecy has no root. Without memory, law has no foundation. Without memory, even music would fade into silence. What I carry may wound me, but it is also what gives meaning to all things." Apollo bowed his head, understanding a fraction of her sorrow. Yet he also saw the nobility in her endurance. Still, the burden grew. At times, Mnemosyne dreamed not of the past, but of oblivion. In those dreams, she imagined what it would be like to forget, to cast away the horrors she had seen, to release the endless echo of pain. In those moments, she felt almost mortal frail, fleeting, free. But always she awoke, chained once more to remembrance. For she knew that if she faltered, if she abandoned her duty, all creation would dissolve into nothingness. The greatest trial of her burden came during the Titaness, the war between the Titans and the Olympians. Mnemosyne did not fight, but she remembered every scream, every wound, every betrayal. She remembered the fire of Zeus's thunderbolts, the roar of stone as mountains cracked, the cries of brothers striking against brothers. And when the Titans fell, she alone carried the memory of their despair. Mortals later spoke of gods rising and Titans vanishing into Tartarus. But Mnemosyne remembered more. She remembered the look in Cronus's eyes as he was dragged into darkness, not rage, but fear. She remembered Rhea's silence as she watched her children overthrow her kin. She remembered even the smallest soldier crushed beneath divine battle, his name forgotten by all but her. After the war, when Olympus stood in triumph, Mnemosyne carried both victory and sorrow in equal measure. The Olympians celebrated, but she walked the earth in quiet mourning. For even the new gods, radiant in their youth, did not grasp the cost of what had been lost. And so her burden deepened, yet her resolve hardened as well. She realized that though memory wounded her, it also granted her power unmatched by any throne. For kings may fall, empires may crumble, even gods may fade, but memory endures. Memory is eternal. Thus, Mnemosyne embraced her suffering. She became not only the keeper of joy and sorrow, but the bridge between them. She taught mortals that remembrance is both blessing and curse, that to live fully is to be remembered wholly. Only for triumphs but for faults, and through this truth she gave them something greater than fleeting existence, the promise of legacy. In time, Zeus himself would come to her, seeking her gift. From their union would spring the Muses, who carried her burden in fragments, each embodying a piece of her memory song: history, tragedy, comedy, poetry. Through them, mortals and gods alike would share in the beauty and pain of remembrance. But even then, the burden of Mnemosyne would remain. She alone bore the whole of existence within her mind, every laugh and every tear, every light and every shadow. She was the eternal witness, the silent archivist of the cosmos, bound not by chains of iron, but by the unbreakable thread of memory. And though her heart was heavy, she never faltered. For Mnemosyne knew that if she let go, she allowed even one moment to be lost, then all meaning would unravel. Thus she walked on, weary but resolute, her burden unshakable, her purpose eternal. She was Mnemosyne, Titaness of Memory, and through her the world remembered. Chapter 6: Mnemosyne and the Weaving of Stories. The birth of tradition stories are threads, delicate yet enduring, woven from the loom of memory. Without them, civilizations crumble into silence, and the deeds of gods and mortals vanish like mist at dawn. It was Mnemosyne who first gathered these threads, spinning them into a tapestry that stretched across time, a tapestry mortals would one day call tradition. From the beginning, memory had lived within her, but until this moment, it had been silent, a reservoir of sorrow and joy. It was only when she looked upon humanity, fragile, fleeting, and forgetful, that she realized her burden must be shared. Mortals could not hold eternity as she did, yet they longed to remember. They feared oblivion as much as they feared death. And so, Mnemosyne taught them the art of storytelling. She walked among shepherds in the valleys, whispering to them the sagas of creation. She sat beside sailors at the shore, teaching them to pass down tales of the sea, of storms and monsters, so that others might survive. She visited the hearths of villages, guiding mothers and fathers to teach their children through fables, so that wisdom might endure even when their voices were silenced. Every story carried truth, though never the whole truth. For Mnemosyne knew that memory itself was a paradox, faithful yet fragile, eternal yet ever-shifting. And so she wove not only facts but meaning into the tales, so that even if the details faded, the essence would remain. In time, mortals began to sing these stories. Their voices rose in chants during festivals, in laments during funerals, in songs around fires at night. What began as memory became myth, and what became myth grew into tradition. Through this, Mnemosyne's burden was lightened, for no longer did she carry every memory alone. The stories echoed through generations, fragments of her gift scattered among countless hearts. Yet the weaving of stories was not without conflict, for where memory gives power, power is often abused. Kings sought to twist tales to glorify themselves, erasing their cruelties and magnifying their triumphs. Warriors reshaped legends so that they alone stood as heroes. Priests altered myths to strengthen their temples, binding mortals with fear. Mnemosyne wept at these distortions, for she knew the truth of what had been. But she also understood that stories were living things, changing as they passed from tongue to tongue. She could not chain them to perfection without stripping them of life. So she whispered to the poets, those mortals who sought beauty over power. She gave them visions in their dreams, urging them to sing not of domination, but of wisdom, justice, and love. It was through these poets that the first great epics were born, songs of gods and heroes that outlived empires. Even when kingdoms fell, the stories remained, carried by wandering bards across the lands. Thus, Mnemosyne ensured that memory endured, not in stone, which could be broken, but in words, which could travel like the wind. The Olympians themselves recognized her influence. Zeus, though mighty, understood that his thunder would mean little if not remembered. Athena saw that wisdom unrecorded was wisdom lost. Even Hades acknowledged that the dead lived on only so long as their names were spoken. And so, though Mnemosyne held no throne upon Olympus, her power rivaled theirs. For what is divinity, if forgotten? But the truest flowering of her gift came with her daughters, the Muses. Born from her union with Zeus, they were fragments of her essence, each embodying a different art of memory. History, music, tragedy, comedy, dance, epic, love poetry, and more. Together, they transformed memory into inspiration, breathing life into human creativity. Through them, the stories of mortals and gods alike became eternal. Still, Mnemosyne's heart carried caution. She knew that stories, once loosed into the world, could heal or harm. A tale could unite nations or ignite wars. A song could comfort the grieving or lead armies into battle. For this reason, she guarded her daughters carefully, guiding them not with chains, but with wisdom. She taught them to honor truth, but also to honor the soul of the storyteller. There came a time when a great city rose upon the earth, its people hungry for glory. They sought to erase their enemies from memory, declaring themselves eternal rulers of men. They burned the records of other lands, silenced the voices of rival poets, and declared their own myths the only truth. This angered Mnemosyne deeply. She appeared in dreams to their rulers, her voice a storm. To forget others is to condemn yourself. Oblivion comes not only to the silenced, but also to those who silence. You seek eternity, but eternity cannot be stolen, it must be shared. The rulers did not listen. Their empire expanded for a time, but like all empires built on arrogance, it fell. Yet the stories of those they tried to erase survived, preserved by wandering poets, remembered by humble villagers, whispered from one heart to another. In the end, the city was forgotten, while the stories it sought to destroy lived on. Thus was Mnemosyne's lesson revealed. Memory cannot be chained, and stories cannot be killed. They are eternal threads, passing from hand to hand, reshaping the world long after kings and empires vanish into dust. And so, Mnemosyne continued her weaving, unseen but ever present. She did not seek temples, nor demand offerings, for her shrine was in the minds of all who remembered. Each tale spoken by a grandmother, each song sung by a wandering bard, each epic recited by a poet beneath the stars, all were her prayers. Through them, she wove not only the past, but the future. For stories, though born of memory, also create what is yet to come. They shape the dreams of children, the ambitions of rulers, the hopes of lovers. In this way, Mnemosyne was not merely the Titaness of memory, she was the mother of tradition, the guardian of identity, the eternal loom upon which the fabric of existence is woven. And though her burden remained heavy, she bore it with pride. For in every story told, she heard her own voice echo, whispering across the ages. Remember, Chapter 7. The River of Forgetfulness, Mnemosyne and Lethe, in the shadowed lands of the underworld. Beyond the gates guarded by Cerberus, 5 rivers carved their way through the realm of Hades. Among them, one shone with a strange, silver light, the river Lethe, the current of forgetfulness. Its waters shimmered like moonlight, beautiful and terrible. Those who drank from it lost all memory of their past lives, their joys and sorrows, their triumphs and failures. They were reborn into silence, their souls cleansed of history. For most gods, this was a simple truth, a natural balance. Yet for Mnemosyne, the Titaness of Memory, Lethe was not merely a river, it was her opposite, her eternal rival, the unweaving hand that undid her every thread. Where she gave memory, Lethe took it away. Where she preserved, Lethe erased. The two forces had coexisted since the dawn of time, for memory without forgetfulness would crush mortals beneath its weight, while forgetfulness without memory would render life meaningless. Still, Mnemosyne could not look upon the river without sorrow. One night, as she wandered the boundaries of Hades' realm, she approached the river's edge. The current whispered softly, like the lullaby of sleep. From its waters rose a figure, pale, serene, cloaked in silence. It was Lethe herself, the goddess who bore the river's name, her face calm as if untouched by the burdens of remembrance. "Mnemosyne," she said, in a voice like still water, "you carry too much. Your burden grows heavier with each passing age. Why not let me take some of it away? Drink of my waters, and you will be free of sorrow, free of weight, free of memory." Mnemosyne's gaze was stern. "If I forget, then all is lost. What are the deeds of gods and men if no one remembers them? What is love if not cherished in the heart? What is wisdom if not carried from one age to another? You speak of freedom, Lethe, but it is only emptiness." Lethe only smiled faintly. "And yet, do you not see how mortals suffer because of you? They cling to grief long after the wound should have healed. They carry hatred across generations, starting wars for slights that should have been forgotten. They are trapped by memory as much as they are guided by it. I give them peace. I give them rest." The Titaness fell silent, for there was truth in these words. She had seen kings fuel endless wars over ancient insults, and widows weep for decades over their lost loves. Memory was a gift, but it was also a chain. Yet Mnemosyne could not yield. Without memory, mortals are not themselves. They become hollow, mere shadows drifting through life. Your peace is the peace of oblivion. I will not surrender them to silence. The two goddesses stood there, gazes locked, one embodying remembrance, the other oblivion. Neither moved, for they both knew that they were not enemies, but halves of a whole. It was Hades himself who finally approached, his dark cloak trailing across the earth like nightfall. "Sisters of remembrance and forgetfulness," he said, his voice deep as the grave. "You quarrel, but you do not see that your powers are both necessary. Souls cannot enter Elysium if they are burdened with sorrow, nor can they reincarnate without release, yet they cannot become nothing either. That is why some drink from Lethe, and others are guided to Mnemosyne." Mnemosyne frowned. "Guided to me? The mortals in your realm never seek me." Hades' lips curved into the faintest shadow of a smile. "Because the world has forgotten the well you guard. Few know that beyond Lethe's waters there lies another spring yours. Mnemosyne, those who drink from your fountain in the underworld do not forget. They awaken with all memory intact, carrying wisdom through lifetimes. But they are few, for your gift is heavy, and only the bravest souls dare to bear it." The Titaness was shaken. She had not known this truth for her fountain lay hidden deep in the realm of death, veiled even from her sight. Yet it was fitting. She was the keeper of memory, and memory was always hidden, buried in minds, locked within hearts, waiting to be remembered. From that day, a balance was struck. Souls who longed for release turned to Lethe, surrendering their pain to the river and returning to the world, unburdened, ready to live anew. But those who thirsted for truth, who sought wisdom across lifetimes, came to Mnemosyne's well. They drank from her waters and carried the weight of memory, weaving destinies rich with meaning. Thus was born the choice that shaped mortal fate, to forget or to remember. Bards and philosophers would one day speak of this mystery. Some told of heroes who remembered past lives, guided by Mnemosyne's spring to achieve greatness. Others warned of kings whose memories consumed them, leaving them haunted and broken. Both were true, for memory was a double-edged gift, and still the two goddesses met at the river's edge, speaking in hushed tones. They did not love one another, yet they did not despise one another either. They were reflections, like light and shadow, day and night. Without Mnemosyne, the world would dissolve into oblivion. Without Lethe, the world would collapse beneath grief. Together, they sustained the rhythm of existence. Mortals who dreamed of these meetings often awoke, unsettled, for in their dreams they saw the river and the fountain, side by side, forgetfulness and memory, silence and song. They understood that one day they too must choose which cup to drink from, and in that choice decide who they truly were. And Mnemosyne, though burdened, accepted this truth. She no longer wept at the river's edge, for she saw that her opposite was not her enemy, but her complement. Lethe was not destruction, but release. Forgetfulness had its place, just as memory did. Still, when she returned to the world of the living, she whispered to poets and philosophers, urging them to remember. For though Lethe gave rest, only memory gave meaning. And as long as mortals continued to tell stories, sing songs, and pass down traditions, her gift would endure stronger than the waters of forgetfulness. Chapter 8. Mnemosyne and the Birth of Oracles. Memory as prophecy, high upon the slopes of Parnassus, where mists drifted through sacred pines and eagles soared across the sky. There stood a shrine so ancient even the Titans whispered of its age. It was the oracle, the dwelling of prophecy, where mortals came to glimpse fragments of the future. Yet few knew that behind every prophecy, behind every word spoken in trance and fire, stood the power of Mnemosyne, Titaness of Memory. For prophecy, though clothed in the mystery of foresight, was rooted in remembrance. What was the future but the echo of patterns long woven, the shadow of histories repeated? To foresee was to remember deeply, to hold the memory of the cosmos itself. And no one carried that memory more completely than Mnemosyne. The first flame of vision, it began in the earliest age, when God still walked openly among men. Mnemosyne wandered the mountains, watching shepherds call to their flocks and hunters pray to Artemis before releasing their arrows. Among them, she found mortals who hungered for truth, men and women who gazed at the stars and asked not for wealth or power, but for understanding. To these seekers, she whispered. At first, her voice was like a dream, slipping into their minds while they slept beneath the open sky. They awoke with visions flashes of what was yet to come. A harvest failing, a storm breaking, a war igniting. When these visions came true, others gathered around them, demanding answers, begging for guidance. And so the first oracles were born not of fire, not of frenzy, but of memory. For Mnemosyne knew what mortals could not. Every action left an imprint, every word spoken carved a mark in the fabric of existence. By remembering deeply enough, one could follow the chain forward, glimpsing what was to come. Apollo and the Pythia. It was Apollo, god of light and truth, who recognized this power. He came to Mnemosyne and bowed his golden head in respect. "Lady Memory," he said, "you hold the keys, not only to the past, but to the future. Yet mortals do not understand. They see prophecy as madness, not as remembrance. Let me serve as your messenger. Let me build temples where your whispers can be heard." Mnemosyne studied him. Apollo was radiant, yet restless. His voice was music, yet sharp as an arrow. He was a god of vision, but also of fire. "You may carry my gift," she told him, "but remember this, prophecy is not certainty. The future is woven from threads, and many strands may yet be cut. Mortals must understand that memory shows them the river's flow, but not the final sea." Apollo agreed, though in his heart he yearned for clarity where none existed. Still, he honored her words. At Delphi, he established his great temple where the Pythia, a woman chosen and consecrated, would inhale the sacred vapors and fall into trance. In that state, she was not speaking Apollo's truth alone, but Mnemosyne's deeper memory. For beneath the temple ran streams tied to her fountain. Before each prophecy, the Pythia drank from a spring, said to flow from Mnemosyne herself. Only then could she recall the eternal patterns, shaping her visions into words mortals could grasp. The burden of memory. Yet with prophecy came sorrow. Many who sought visions left broken. A king who learned he would fall in battle. A mother who foresaw the death of her child. Mortals believed they wanted truth, but often they were unready for it. Mnemosyne felt their grief. In her heart, she questioned, was she a giver of wisdom, or a bringer of despair? For each prophecy fulfilled, 1,000 tears were shed. She sought Lethe at the river's edge once more, hoping for solace. "Your gift wounds them," Lethe whispered. "If they forgot their fates, they would live in peace." But Mnemosyne shook her head. "Peace without truth is emptiness. They may grieve, but through remembrance they learn. Through knowledge they shape themselves. Even sorrow becomes meaning when remembered." Thus she continued her work, though her heart grew heavy. Prophecy as song to ease this burden. Mnemosyne turned again to her daughters, the Muses. She taught them to weave prophecy into song, so that even grim visions might carry beauty. When a bard sang of a hero's death, he also sang of the courage that lit that death with glory. When a poet spoke of ruin, he spoke also of rebirth. In this way, memory transformed grief into wisdom. Prophecy became not merely warning, but guidance, teaching mortals to endure what must be endured. Some say that even the Sibyls, those wandering prophetesses, whose voices echoed across Italy and beyond, carried Mnemosyne's gift. They too drank from hidden springs, and in their riddling verses lay fragments of eternal memory, the eternal choice. In the end, Mnemosyne understood that prophecy was no different from the balance between her and Lethe. Mortals must choose what to carry and what to release. Some would cling to visions and despair, others would forget them and live freely. But a few, the wisest, would remember, reflect, and change their paths. And so the Titaness of Memory wove her threads not only into the past, but into the fabric of destiny. She whispered to the prophets, guided the oracles, and taught the singers, shaping the very way mortals understood fate. For to remember was to know, and to know was to foresee. Chapter 9. The Nine Muses, Mnemosynes, daughters of inspiration, long before the Olympians claimed their thrones, before mortals etched their tales upon stone, there was Mnemosyne, whose gift of memory held the seeds of all art and knowledge. Yet memory alone was not enough, for what use was remembrance if it did not inspire? What purpose had truth if it was never sung, painted, or spoken? Thus, in her union with Zeus, the great king of Olympus, Mnemosyne brought forth 9 radiant daughters, the Muses, born in the shadow of Pyrrha's mountains. Their voices were the echoes of eternity, and their steps carried the rhythm of divine order. Each embodied a spark of inspiration, a fragment of the endless memory Mnemosyne guarded. Together, they became the bridge between gods and mortals, weaving divine memory into mortal creativity. The birth on Pieria. The story begins on the slopes of Mount Pieria, a land lush with meadows and springs. Zeus, weary of endless strife, sought solace in Mnemosyne's embrace. For 9 nights he lay with her, and from that union came 9 daughters, each carrying a different thread of divine artistry. When the newborns first cried, their voices did not bring sorrow, but song. The earth trembled with music, and the rivers paused in their flowing, enchanted. Even the stars seemed to lean closer, as though eager to hear. The Olympians marveled, for never before had such harmony graced the world. Mnemosyne looked upon her children and knew, through them, mortals would remember not only facts and histories, but emotions, dreams, and the beauty of existence itself. The 9 sisters, each muse, carried her own gift, distinct yet bound by a single source, the wellspring of memory. Calliope, the muse of epic poetry, wielded the power of grand tales. She carried a writing tablet, upon which the fates of heroes and the rise of kingdoms were inscribed. From her came the songs of Homer, and every epic sung around a fire. Clio, the muse of history, held scrolls of recorded time. She whispered into the minds of scribes and chroniclers, ensuring that no deed, however small, was forgotten. Erato, muse of love poetry, bore a lyre strung with silver. Her music awakened longing in the hearts of mortals and gods alike, softening even the sternest souls. Euterpe, muse of music, carried the flute. Her melodies moved rivers to dance and trees to sway, teaching mortals the language of sound. Melpomene, muse of tragedy, wore a sorrowful mask. She revealed the dignity of suffering, the nobility of sacrifice, and the wisdom within grief. Polyhymnia, muse of sacred hymns, draped herself in solemn robes. Through her, mortals learned to praise the divine with reverence and awe. Terpsichore, muse of dance, brought joy to body and spirit. With every step, she taught mortals how to turn movement into expression. Talia, muse of comedy, held the mask of laughter. She lightened heavy hearts, proving that even the gods valued mirth. Urania, muse of astronomy, lifted her gaze to the stars. She carried a celestial globe, guiding mortals to chart the heavens and discover their place in the cosmos. Together, they formed a chorus of inspiration, ensuring that no corner of mortal life remained untouched by beauty. The gift to mortals, the Muses, did not remain hidden in divine halls. They walked among mortals, unseen yet ever present. To a shepherd dreaming beneath the night sky, Urania whispered constellations. To a grieving mother, Melpomene gave a song that transformed sorrow into art. To a youth by the sea, Erato stirred a heart that would one day compose poems of love. Mortals believed these gifts to be their own, but in truth, every spark of genius was Mnemosyne's memory, carried through her daughters. The Muses were not creators themselves, they were awakeners, lifting veils from mortal minds so they might glimpse eternity. Rivalry with oblivion. But where there was memory and inspiration, there was also danger. The daughters of Mnemosyne clashed often with the forces of oblivion. Forgetfulness sought to erase what they inspired. Silence sought to smother their songs. It was said that once, the Muses gathered in Delphi to sing in Apollo's temple. Their voices rose in perfect harmony, shaking the very stones. Yet, as the final note lingered, a shadow fell a filleth river of forgetfulness, swelling to drown the echoes. The Muses did not fight with swords or spears. Instead, they sang louder, their voices weaving memories so deep they could not be erased. Even Lethe herself paused, awed by their beauty. And so the memory of that song remained in the hearts of mortals forever, inspiring hymns that lasted through ages. Eternal companions, the Olympian gods loved the Muses, but none more than Apollo. With his golden lyre, he often joined them in song, calling them his companions. Some said he even loved Calliope most of all, for her voice was as commanding as his own. Wherever the Muses danced, the world brightened. Where they sang, fields bloomed. Where they whispered, mortals painted, sculpted, composed, and wrote. They were not merely goddesses of art. They were proof that memory itself was divine, that to create was to remember something eternal. The legacy of the Muses. Through the centuries, poets called upon them before beginning their epics. Hesiod and Homer both invoked their names, admitting that no mortal voice could tell a story without their aid. Philosophers, too, sought Urania's guidance when gazing at the stars. Priests prayed to Polyhymnia in solemn rituals, while actors wore masks shaped after Thalia and Melpomene. Even in distant lands, echoes of the Muses appeared under new names, for inspiration knows no borders. Wherever mortals sought to turn memory into expression, the daughters of Mnemosyne were there, unseen but present, immortal as song itself. Mnemosyne watched her daughters with quiet pride. Through them, her gift had blossomed. Memory no longer lived only in scrolls or minds, it lived in music, dance, laughter, and tears. It lived in the stories mortals told their children, in the songs sung across oceans, in the constellations charted in the heavens. She knew then that though Lethe would always flow, though forgetfulness would always beckon, the spark of memory would never fade. For as long as her daughters inspired, mortals would remember not just facts, but meaning. And that, Mnemosyne realized, was the true victory of memory, not to preserve endlessly, but to inspire eternally. Chapter 10. Mnemosyne and the Eternal Archives. Memory beyond time, deep within the folds of the cosmos, beyond the thrones of Olympus, and even past the shadowed halls of the Titans. There lies a hidden domain, known only to the goddess of memory herself. Mnemosyne called it the Eternal Archives, a place where all moments, great and small, were preserved. It was not a palace of stone, nor a library of scrolls, but a realm of flowing light and echoes, where time itself unfolded like an endless tapestry. Here, every word spoken, every laugh shared, every tear shed was woven into strands of memory. No event, however fleeting, escaped Mnemosyne's notice. Even when mortals believed they had been forgotten, their essence remained recorded, shimmering eternally in her archives. The river beyond the river. The archives were guarded by a river unlike any other. To mortals, the river Lethe was known as the stream of forgetfulness, where souls drank to forget their past lives. But few knew that beneath its current flowed another river, invisible yet eternal, the river of remembrance, sprung from Mnemosyne's heart. This river carried not oblivion, but preservation. Souls who touched its waters could glimpse their past, even lives long forgotten. For this reason, mystery cults whispered of Mnemosyne in secret rites, teaching initiates to drink from her river rather than Lethe, so that their souls might awaken in eternity with full knowledge of who they were. Thus, Mnemosyne's domain became a counterbalance to Lethe's erasure, a promise that nothing truly vanished, even when memory seemed lost. The weaving of time. Within the eternal archives, Mnemosyne was not merely a keeper, but a weaver. With golden threads drawn from the river, she wove the fabric of time itself. Each thread represented a life, glowing brighter with every act of love, sacrifice, or courage, and dimmer when forgotten deeds slipped into obscurity. Gods and mortals alike were astonished to learn that their stories lived side by side within her tapestries. A farmer's humble kindness might glow beside the triumphs of kings, equal in its radiance. For to Mnemosyne, all memories mattered, and each thread added depth to the greater design. Even Zeus, her one-time consort, entered the archives in awe, humbled by the realization that his victories and decrees were but a few strands among countless others. Mnemosyne's power was subtle yet supreme. She gave meaning to all things by ensuring they were remembered. The challenge of oblivion, yet no keeper of light exists without a shadow. The force of oblivion, an ancient power even older than Lethe, sought to unravel her work. Unlike the gentle forgetfulness of the river, oblivion was a void, hungering to consume memory itself, to return all things to silence, as if they had never been. One tale tells that oblivion once breached the edge of the archives. Where it touched, entire lives flickered and vanished, memories of unnamed heroes, of lost civilizations, of songs that had never been sung again. The tapestry shuddered as if in pain, and Mnemosyne herself felt her strength waver. But she did not falter. Calling upon her daughters, the Muses, she filled the archives with song, weaving sound into light. Their voices were so strong that they anchored fragile memories, protecting them from dissolution. Even oblivion recoiled, unable to silence the harmony of memory and inspiration combined. Thus, Mnemosyne proved that remembrance was not a passive act, but a battle-an eternal resistance against the void. The keeper of forgotten names, mortals prayed to many gods for fortune, strength, or wisdom. Few prayed to Mnemosyne, for memory was a quiet power, unnoticed until it slipped away. But among the dead, she was revered. Souls, wandering in Hades, often sought her, desperate to recall who they once were. It was said that Mnemosyne kept a book of forgotten names. Whenever a soul spoke its true name by her river, the letters glowed anew in the pages. Those who found their names regained clarity, standing taller as they remembered their lives. Others, who could not recall, faded into shadows, carried away by Lethe's current. In this way, Mnemosyne gave a final mercy to mortals, the chance to hold on to themselves, even beyond death. The wisdom of the archives, the eternal archives, were not only a vault of the past, but also a mirror of the future. By studying the tapestry, Mnemosyne could see patterns, the rise and fall of empires, the echoes of choices repeated across generations. She never dictated fate, for that was the realm of the Moirai, the Fates, but she guided wisdom. At times, she whispered to prophets and poets, embedding visions in their minds. Oracles at Delphi sometimes claimed that it was not Apollo, but Mnemosyne, who had gifted them their clearest truths. For memory, after all, is the mother of foresight. To see what may come, one must first understand what has been. Legacy among mortals. Though the Olympians eventually overshadowed the Titans, Mnemosyne's influence never waned. Every historian invoking Clio, every poet calling upon Calliope, every astronomer gazing with Uraniol were in truth honoring Mnemosyne, the source of their inspiration. Mystery cults in Greece and beyond whispered her name in hidden groves, offering honey and water to her river. They believed that to die with her blessing was to awaken beyond death with memory intact, free from the chains of oblivion. Even today, the word mnemonic carries her essence, reminding mortals of her eternal gift, that to remember is to exist. Mnemosyne's triumph standing in her archives. Mnemosyne watched the threads shimmer with countless colors. The laughter of children, the courage of warriors, the tears of lovers all were preserved. Even as centuries passed, even as gods and empires rose and fell, her archives endured. She smiled, for she knew the truth. Time itself was fragile, but memory was eternal. Oblivion might threaten, Lethe might flow, but so long as a single mortal remembered, Mnemosyne's work would never be undone. In the end, it was not thunderbolts or oceans, not war or fire, that proved most powerful. It was memory, the quiet, unyielding thread that bound all existence together. Chapter 11. The Songs of the Muses. Carriers of memory in the twilight glow of Olympus, where golden clouds drifted like veils across the heavens. A sound arose, unlike any other, chorus of voices, so pure and resonant that even the stars seemed to tremble in their orbits. This was the song of the Muses, the 9 daughters of Mnemosyne and Zeus, born from the union of divine memory and supreme power. Each muse carried a spark of their mother's essence, and through their gifts, they became vessels through which the memory of the cosmos would endure. Mnemosyne watched her daughters from a high ridge of Olympus, her eyes soft with both pride and gravity. They were not merely singers, not simply keepers of art. They were the embodiment of memory woven into sound, rhythm, and story. For when mortals sang, painted, or recited the tales of old, they unknowingly called upon the Muses, who whispered truth and remembrance into their hearts. The first to step forward was Calliope, muse of epic poetry. Her voice surged like thunder over the sea, carrying tales of gods and heroes. With each word she sang, the memory of battles past of Achilles, of Perseus, of Heracles rose, anew, etched forever into the hearts of those who heard. Beside her stood Clio, the muse of history, who wove timelines like a tapestry, her verses marking victories and tragedies so none would fade into shadow. Then came Euterpe, whose flute filled the air with melodies that spoke of mortal joys and griefs. Erato followed, her songs steeped in love's passion, binding hearts together through memory. Melpomene, cloaked in sorrow, sang dirges that reminded humankind of loss, while Thalia answered with laughter, ensuring memory carried not only pain but also delight. The twins Terpsichore and Polyhymnia danced their memories across rhythm and sacred hymns, moving the stars with motion and devotion. And at last, Urania, her gaze forever fixed on the heavens, sang of constellations and cosmic design, ensuring the celestial memory would never be lost. even when mortal eyes grew blind with time. Together, their voices became a river of remembrance. Where Mnemosyne's role had once been solitary, now her legacy branched into 9 radiant forms, ensuring that the world would always hold fragments of divine truth. Yet, as their voices spread across the mortal realm, not all ears welcomed them. In the far reaches of the earth, where shadows of oblivion whispered, there rose a subtle resistance. Lethe, the river of forgetfulness, stirred restlessly. For as the Muses brought remembrance, Lethe longed for silence and oblivion. Mortals who drank of its waters forgot their pasts, their pains, and their joys. To Lethe, forgetting was mercy. To Mnemosyne, forgetting was death. The clash between remembrance and forgetfulness grew sharper as time passed. Some mortals sought the songs of the Muses, engraving them into stone, scrolls, and memory. Others sought Lethe, longing for the release of unburdened minds. And so a balance formed, where memory illuminated, forgetting softened. But Mnemosyne knew that without her daughters, the world would descend into hollow emptiness. One day, as the Muses sang at the foot of Mount Helicon, a mortal bard approached, trembling with awe. His name was Hesiod, a shepherd whose heart had longed for meaning. The Muses placed their hands upon his lips, and in that instant, he became their instrument. Through him, their stories flowed into words, and from his verses, the myths of gods and heroes would be remembered for millennia. Mnemosyne looked upon this with a quiet smile. Her daughters had become the bridge between the divine and the mortal, ensuring that memory would outlast even time itself. Their songs were not just art, but the very fabric of continuity, tying generations together in a single thread of remembrance. Yet, Mnemosyne knew her story was not yet complete. The final test lay ahead, to ensure her memory endured, not just in songs, but in the eternal consciousness of all beings. The last chapter of her journey would reveal whether memory could truly conquer the abyss of forgetfulness, or whether Lethe's silence would someday swallow all. And so, the Muses sang on, weaving melodies that touched every corner of the earth. Wherever their voices traveled, mortals remembered, gods wept, and the stars themselves seemed to hum in harmony. The songs of the Muses were not only carriers of memory, they were the heartbeat of eternity. Chapter 12. The Legacy of Memory. Mnemosyne's eternal gift. As dawn stretched its first golden light across the horizon, the world seemed quieter, as though all of creation held its breath. Mnemosyne, the Titaness of Memory, stood at the edge of Olympus, gazing upon the realms of gods and mortals alike. She had watched her children, the 9 Muses, spread remembrance through song, poetry, and history. She had seen mortals carve names into stone and whisper stories by firelight so they might live on after death. Yet Mnemosyne knew her journey was not truly complete until her legacy had been secured for eternity. For memory was fragile. Words could be lost in fire. Scrolls could decay. Monuments could crumble. And even the greatest songs could fade in the winds of time. Against her stood Lethe, the silent river of forgetfulness, whose waters promised peace to those who abandoned the burdens of the past. Mnemosyne did not despise Lethe, for forgetting had its place, but she feared what might happen if all chose oblivion over remembrance. Thus, she gathered her daughters beneath the stars one final time. The Muses, radiant in their varied beauty, circled their mother, awaiting her wisdom. "My children," Mnemosyne said, her voice deep as the earth and soft as a mother's touch. Your songs have carried my gift across the lands, and mortals now know that memory is the soul of their existence. But we must weave something greater, something eternal that cannot be undone by time, flame, or silence. The Muses listened intently, their eyes glimmering with devotion. Calliope spoke first. We have given mortals stories of gods and heroes, but stories can be forgotten, Clio added. We have taught them history, yet history too may be rewritten or lost. Euterpe, her flute resting gently in her hands, whispered, "Music fades the moment it is played." Mnemosyne nodded, acknowledging each truth. "Yes, but together, your voices can forge something everlasting, not bound to parchment or stone, but to the very soul of existence itself." With this, she raised her arms, summoning the great river of memory that flowed unseen beneath all worlds. The river shimmered with images wars fought, loves won, births, deaths, and the laughter of children. Every thought, every breath, every heartbeat of mortal and god alike drifted within it. "This," Mnemosyne declared, "is the eternal archive. It shall endure beyond destruction, beyond silence, beyond the end of even the gods. And through you, my daughters, it will remain alive in the minds of mortals who dare to listen." The Muses began to sing, weaving their voices into the current of the river. Each muse contributed her gift: epic, history, music, love, tragedy, comedy, dance, hymn, and astronomy. Their melodies became threads, binding the river's flow into a tapestry of memory that could never unravel. The stars themselves brightened, echoing their chorus. In that moment, Lethe herself appeared, her form pale and flowing like mist. She looked upon Mnemosyne with both envy and sorrow. "You have built a river to rival mine, sister," she whispered. "But do you not see? Mortals are weary. They long to forget. They crave peace more than remembrance." Mnemosyne met her sister's gaze without anger, "And so they shall, when they choose. Your gift has its place. But without mine, there would be nothing to forget at all. The songs of my daughters ensure that existence has meaning before your waters claim it." Lethe was silent, for she could not deny the truth. Slowly, she faded back into her mist, leaving Mnemosyne and her daughters to complete their work. When the last note of their song faded, the eternal archive pulsed with life. From that day forward, every act of courage, every tale of love, every song and poem would leave its mark in the eternal current, carried forever by Mnemosyne's gift. Even when mortals passed into forgetfulness, their deeds would not vanish. The archive remembered. Generations later, mortals would call upon the Muses before they began their art, their histories, or their songs. They would say, "Sing to me, O Muse," not knowing that in those words they summoned Mnemosyne herself, the memory of all that had come before. And so, Mnemosyne's journey came to rest. She had woven her essence not only into the gods, not only into her daughters, but into the very soul of humanity. Her name would not be shouted as loudly as Zeus's, nor feared as much as Hades's, but her presence would be deeper, subtler, eternal. For as long as one mortal remembered, Mnemosyne would live, and as long as the stars burned above, her daughters would sing, carrying memory into eternity. Thus ended the tale of Mnemosyne, Titaness of Memory, keeper of the past, mother of the Muses, and guardian of the eternal archive.